Commander Jax of the Galactic Dominion had witnessed countless wars across 100 worlds. He'd seen entire planets reduced to radioactive dust and oceans boil away in the heat of battle. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for humanity. When the Grand Assembly of Deathworld species gathered, it was meant to be an impressive display of the universe's most savage apex predators. The iron-skinned Nurians, the blade-plated Zethians, and the fire-blooded Morvath all attended, each boasting trophies and battle scars, each certain they were evolution's pinnacle. Then the humans arrived. They didn't march in with military precision. They ambled off their shuttle like they were late to a casual lunch. Their spacecraft looked cobbled together from spare parts and wishful thinking. Their armor didn't match. Their weapons varied wildly, and they wore strange smirks that unsettled even the most battle-hardened warriors. General Kreth of the Zethians laughed, a sound like metal grinding against metal. These are the supposed monsters of terror. They look like confused miners who took a wrong turn. No one was laughing after the trials began. The first test was simple. Survive the death maze, an arena lined with energy blades, shifting walls, and genetically engineered beasts bred for maximum savagery. The Zethian champions traditionally completed the course in 10 minutes. The humans finished in 4. They didn't just survive, they played with it. They confused tracking systems by throwing dirt, disoriented the beasts with high-pitched whistles, and disassembled one of the automated turrets to use as an improvised cannon. There was no formal strategy, just pure chaotic improvisation. Jax leaned forward on his observation platform, deeply frowning. "What are they doing?" he muttered. Beside him, a Nurian warlord shook his obsidian-armored head. "I don't know," he rumbled, "but it is terrifying." When the final human, a wiry, scarred figure named Finn, crossed the finish line, he wasn't even breathing hard. He just grinned at the assembled Deathworlders, raised a mug of pungent liquid, and toasted them with a wink. Later, in the Grand Chamber, the debates began. The Zethians insisted on another trial, hand-to-hand combat. A stocky human named Ilara faced a Zethian champion 3 heads taller, bristling with natural armor and talons capable of tearing through starship hulls. It wasn't supposed to be fair. It was supposed to be a lesson, just not the one the assembly expected. Ilara didn't adopt a fighting stance. She leaned slightly forward, one hand casually resting on her hip. The Zethian roared and charged at full speed. Ilara sidestepped. That, simple. With casual ease bordering on disrespect, she let the Zethian rush past, planted her foot behind his leg, and sent him sprawling. Before he could recover, she dropped onto him, drove a sharp elbow into the soft gap at the base of his skull, and ended the match in 6 seconds. The assembly erupted into chaos, accusations of cheating, demands for disqualification. Jax watched silently, his mind racing. The Zethians weren't weak. The death maze wasn't easy. What was he missing? It wasn't until the humans addressed the assembly that Jax began to understand. Their leader, an older woman named Zara, stepped forward. Her uniform was slightly wrinkled, her boots scuffed. She carried none of the polished menace the others wore like a second skin. But when she spoke, the entire chamber listened. "You think strength is about muscle," Zara said calmly. "You think it's about claws and scales and fire and raw power. You think survival is about who can kill the loudest." She shook her head slowly. "Strength," Zara continued, "is about making the enemy fight your fight. It's about thinking faster, moving smarter, hitting first and worst. It's about knowing that sometimes the best weapon isn't the one you hold. It's the one you make when you need it." She smiled then, somehow more chilling than any snarl. "You don't beat humans by being stronger. You beat us by being smarter." Her eyes swept the room. "Good luck with that." Jack sat back, every instinct screaming a warning. These creatures weren't Deathworlders in the traditional sense. They were something else, something worse. They were adaptable. The next test was diplomacy. It should have been simple. The Grand Assembly prided itself on being a council of logic and honor among Deathworld species. Treaties were signed through a careful dance of threats and posturing until agreements were reached. The humans ignored all protocol. When invited to the treaty floor, they arrived late. Zara strolled in holding a cup of steaming black liquid, which she sipped without apology. Finn sauntered behind her, twirling a pen between his fingers like a weapon he hadn't decided how to use yet. Ilara wore a casual jacket with what looked like a cartoon character stitched onto the sleeve. The Nurian delegate, a towering mass of armored plates and ceremonial scars, rose to speak. "We demand acknowledgement of the Nurian claim over Quadrant 47. Zara sipped her drink. "No," the Nurian blinked, thrown off script. "You object?" "No," Zara said. "I said no. We don't acknowledge your claim." "You must offer a counterclaim," the Nurian growled, flaring his sensory spines, "or show challenge by right of combat." Zara shrugged. "Not interested." Jax, watching from the upper galleries, felt tension ripple through the chamber. No species, simply refused to engage. That was the highest insult. "You disrespect the right," the Nurian bellowed, slamming a clawed fist into the stone floor, scattering dust and chips of rock. Zara set down her cup with deliberate care. "You think everything's about posturing," she said evenly. "But let me explain something. When humans don't recognize your authority, we don't argue, we don't fight, we just act like you don't exist." She leaned forward, voice dropping. "And if you make the mistake of pushing it, we don't bark, we don't growl, we remove the problem." The room went dead silent. The Nurian sat down without another word. Later, as the assembly recessed, Jax moved to intercept Zara. It was a breach of protocol to approach directly, but he couldn't allow his questions to fester. "You court danger with your disrespect," Jax said, falling into step beside the human. Zara smiled faintly. "No, Commander. We respect danger. We just don't fear it." Jax studied the human carefully. Her build was unremarkable. Her body lacked the natural armor or weaponry of any Deathworld species, but her eyes, those flat, unreadable eyes, were more unsettling than any blade. "You fight differently," Jax said. "We survive differently," Zara corrected. "Because our world didn't make us the strongest. It made us the meanest." Jax nodded slowly. Deathworlds weren't judged solely by their hostility. Some bred giant apex predators, some forced the evolution of natural defenses or strength. But Earth, it seemed, had bred something else, endless adaptability. The contest resumed the following day with a new challenge, a direct endurance trial. No weapons, no tools, just physical endurance under increasingly brutal environmental conditions. The rules were clear. The environment would shift through extremes, burning heat, freezing cold, crushing pressure, toxic atmospheres. Each participant could quit at any time. Last species standing would be declared dominant. 50 delegates entered the survival dome. The humans sent just 2, Ilara and a young recruit named Kai. The first phase was desert heat with temperatures climbing to 200 degrees. Several species with thick outer shells handled it easily. Ilara stripped down to an undershirt, poured water over her head, and muttered something about summer back home being worse. Kai casually built a makeshift shade using his jacket and a broken pole he found nearby. Next came sub-zero temperatures. Ice coated the ground. Breath crystallized instantly. The Nurians and Morvath, creatures built for heat, began to suffer. Some withdrew. The humans huddled together, sharing body heat and singing off-key songs to keep their spirits up. When pressure increased and the walls flexed inward, making breathing difficult, the Zethians with their rigid exoskeletons adapted well. Many other Species collapsed, unable to withstand the crushing force. Kai grinned at Alara as his face flushed but remained steady. "Feels like family dinner at my aunt's house," he joked, clutching his sides. When the dome flooded with poisonous mist, the breathing apparatuses failed and systems short-circuited. The humans pulled out simple cloth masks, soaked them in their own saliva, and kept moving. After 6 more hours, only 3 competitors remained: a battered Zethian, Alara, and Kai. The Zethian stood swaying, his armor cracked, his breathing ragged. Alara stumbled but caught herself. Kai kept grinning like he was at a casual gathering. Then the Zethian fell, too exhausted to rise. The humans didn't celebrate. They simply looked at each other, nodded once, and sat down together. When the medics rushed in, the humans waved them off. Jax watched from the observation deck, unease gnawing at him. They hadn't been the strongest or the best equipped. They hadn't even tried to dominate. They had simply endured. And somehow, that was more frightening than any weapon Jax had ever seen. The assembly's patience wore thin. After the endurance trials, many species demanded a final test, a true measure of battlefield prowess. It would be a simulation, but the stakes were clear. Reputation, pride, and dominance hung in the balance. The environment was a captured moon, re-engineered to simulate a chaotic battlefield. Weapons were randomized, supplies limited, allies unreliable. Perfect chaos to test not just strength or endurance, but true survival instincts under fire. Every species sent polished, disciplined teams gleaming in intimidating armor. The humans showed up in mismatched gear again, laughing and shoving each other as if preparing for a vacation. Jax shook his head, unable to reconcile the image. No Deathworld species treated battle lightly, yet the humans behaved like they were getting ready for a sporting event. The countdown began. Teams dispersed into the simulated cityscape of crumbling buildings and dense jungle. The opening hours were predictable. The Zethians dominated with brute force. The Morvath ignited parts of the battlefield to herd enemies into kill zones, and the Nurians fortified a central tower, daring challengers to attack. And the humans? They disappeared. Left no trace, no signal, no movement large enough to track. It was as if they had evaporated. "Where are they?" Jax muttered, studying the reports. The answer came 12 hours later, after a brutal engagement with a Nurian strike. Team, the Zethians retreated to a fortified bunker to regroup. They barely had time to catch their breath when the walls collapsed inward explosively. Out of the smoke and rubble came the humans, moving fast, striking with surgical precision. No battle cries, no grandstanding, just rapid, devastating efficiency. They weren't fighting for honor. They were fighting to win. The Zethians never had a chance. The Morvath fared no better. Believing they had secured a thermal advantage, they were caught off guard when the humans rerouted the cooling vents to flash freeze their defensive lines. Half the Morvath team was incapacitated before they understood what had happened. Even the mighty Nurians, entrenched in their tower, found themselves under siege, not by force, but by starvation. The humans cut off their supplies, poisoned their water stores, and sabotaged their automated defenses one by one. By the time the humans finally stormed the tower, the Nurians were too weak to resist. "They don't fight like Deathworlders," a voice said quietly behind Jax. He turned to see the Morvath High Commander, her face set in grim acceptance. "They don't honor the traditions," she continued. "They don't seek glorious battle. They don't revel in the contest." Jax nodded slowly. "They just dismantle everything in their path," he finished. The simulation ended after 30 hours. Only the human team stood at the center of the battlefield, battered but victorious. Zara, Alara, Finn, and Kai stood quietly as the assembly gathered again. No celebration, no taunting, just that same maddening calm. Zara stepped forward. "You asked for proof," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber. "You wanted to see what humanity could do." She gestured to the displays behind her. still showing the crumbled, burning battlefield. Now you know. A Zethian war leader rose, trembling with rage. "You are dishonorable," he shouted. "You fight like cowards." Zara's mouth twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. "We fight to survive," she said. "We fight to win. You want glory, that's your weakness. You want honor, that's your leash. We need neither." Another delegate, a scarred Morvath, snarled, "You are monsters." Zara shrugged. "Maybe, but we're still standing." The chamber erupted into shouting, threats, accusations. Jax stood silently amid the storm, watching the humans with a sinking feeling. They weren't stronger, faster, or more technologically advanced. They were simply more willing to do whatever it took. And there was no honor, no strength, no ancient tradition that could defend against that. Jax wondered if the Assembly even realized what they had invited into their halls. Because humans weren't just another Deathworld species, they were something worse. They were the species that would look at every sacred rule, every cherished tradition, every line drawn in the sand, and then step over all of them without a second thought. The Assembly reconvened for the final time in a heavy, uneasy atmosphere. There would be no more contests, no more simulations. The results were undeniable. The humans had proven themselves beyond challenge. Now the only matter left was integration, how humanity would be formally recognized among the Deathworld species and what status they would hold. The gathering hall, once vibrant with boasts and ceremony, felt like a tomb. Jax took his place, among the commanders and delegates, studying the humans as they entered. No banners, no ceremony, just simple, direct steps to the center of the room. Zara stood before the assembly without preamble. No one interrupted. No one dared. "You called us here to judge if we were worthy," she said. "You measured us against your standards. You weighed us by your traditions. You tried to fit us into your world." She let the silence stretch. "But here's the truth you couldn't see. We don't fit into anyone's world." Jax watched delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. Zara's voice was steady, but the words felt heavier than any blade. "You thought Deathworlders were the peak, that surviving your homeworlds made you unbeatable. But survival isn't about teeth or claws or armor." Zara's gaze swept across the hall, pinning every species in place. "It's about not quitting when you're outgunned. It's about finding a way when logic says there is none. It's about dragging yourself through the mud, bleeding, broken, desperate, and still moving forward." Alara, Finn, and Kai stood behind her, silent sentinels of a truth too big for ceremony. "That's humanity," Zara finished. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Jax shifted slightly, feeling the weight of the moment. This was not conquest or domination by force. It was something more profound and far more dangerous. A council elder from the Galax Order rose, his voice brittle with pride. "You are dangerous, unpredictable. You threaten the balance we have built for generations." Zara gave a humorless smile. "Good." Shock spread through the hall. The elder sputtered, "You welcome chaos?" "We are chaos," Zara said, "but not mindless destruction. Adaptation, change, growth. The galaxy stagnates under the weight of tradition and fear. We bring evolution." Jax felt a chill. It was not an overt threat. It was a promise. The Zethian leader stood abruptly. "You mean to rule us, then? Conquer our worlds?" Zara shook her head slowly. "We have no interest in ruling you." She paused. "But we will never be ruled by you either." A heavy silence followed. In the corner of the hall, Jax saw realization dawn on dozens of faces. Humanity wasn't seeking domination or alliances. They weren't seeking anything. They simply were. And that was what made them unstoppable. The Morvath High Speaker rose. "Then what do you seek?" Zara shrugged. "A place, room to breathe, freedom to make mistakes, Freedom to find new frontiers. She smiled faintly. And if you stand in our way, well, you already know how that ends. There it was. Not a threat, but a certainty. Jack stood slowly, drawing the attention of the hall. All eyes turned to him. He inclined his head slightly toward Zara. You have proven your strength. You have proven your will. You are unlike anything we have encountered. He straightened, voice firm. I propose humanity be granted full member status, with the understanding that they are not bound by precedent. A ripple of shock swept through the room. It was an unprecedented motion. No species had ever been given such leeway. No Deathworlder had ever refused the ancient rites. But Jax saw no alternative. Trying to force humanity into old frameworks would be like trying to trap a storm in a bottle. There were murmurs and objections, but slowly, reluctantly, the room shifted. Delegates nodded, some in anger, some in fear, some in admiration. The final vote was cast. Unanimous. Zara nodded once, as if she had expected no other outcome. As the assembly concluded, Jax made his way to where the humans gathered. Zara turned to greet him. You understand, Jax said quietly. You have unsettled more than you know. Zara's eyes glinted with something that was not quite amusement and not quite menace. Good, she said again. Jax laughed despite himself. You realize many will not accept this easily. Some will resist. Some will try to strike at you from the shadows. Zara shrugged. They'll learn. Jax believed her. He looked at these strange, battered creatures from a blue world on the edge of the galaxy. They had no scales, no claws, no fire in their veins. Yet somehow they were the most dangerous beings he had ever met. Welcome to the assembly, Jax said. Zara clapped him on the shoulder, a gesture both friendly and alarmingly intimate. Thanks, she said. Now, where's the bar? Jax laughed, a deep, rolling sound that startled even himself. The humans sauntered off toward the nearest exit, laughing and arguing about who owed whom a drink, but their integration into galactic society was far from smooth. In the months that followed, several species formed an alliance called the Purity Coalition, determined to put humans back in their place. Their first strike came without warning, a coordinated attack on 3 human outposts in the Rigel sector. The coalition expected a standard military response. What they got was something else entirely. Within days, the leadership of the coalition began experiencing unexplainable equipment failures. Supply chains collapsed. Communication systems developed glitches that sent military forces to wrong coordinates. None of it was traceable to human involvement, yet the pattern was unmistakable. No direct confrontation, no honorable challenge. Just problems that multiplied until functioning became impossible. When the coalition finally surrendered, they found the humans waiting for them not with weapons drawn, but with trade agreements and cultural exchange programs. The message was clear. Fight us and lose everything. Work with us and gain a future. 5 years later, at the Centennial Assembly, Jax, now Grand Marshal of the Combined Fleets, watched as human influence had spread throughout the galaxy. They hadn't conquered. They had connected. They hadn't dominated. They had adapted. And most surprisingly, they had changed others. Species that had remained static for millennia were now experimenting with new governmental systems. Ancient enemies were finding common ground in human-brokered agreements. The rigid hierarchies that had defined galactic society were bending, evolving, becoming more flexible. As Zara, now Earth's ambassador to the Assembly, took her place at the council table, she caught Jax's eye and gave him that same unsettling smile. You've changed. Us, Jax admitted when they spoke privately later. The galaxy is unrecognizable from what it was before you arrived. Zara nodded, sipping from a glass of amber liquid. That's what humans do, she said. We change things. Sometimes by force, sometimes by choice, but always inevitably. And when everything has changed, Jax asked, "What then?" Zara looked out at the stars visible through the observation window, countless pinpricks of light against the endless dark. "Then we'll change too," she said softly. "That's the secret the rest of you haven't figured out yet. We're not fixed. We're not finished. We're always becoming something new." Jax felt a strange mixture of dread and hope. "Is that a promise or a threat?" Zara laughed. "Commander, after all this time, you still don't understand." She turned to face him fully, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "With humans, it's always both." As they stood together watching the galaxy spread before them, Jax finally understood the true nature of the species that had walked so casually into their midst. Humans weren't champions or conquerors or even survivors. They were catalysts, and the reaction they had started would never end.